Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt and welcome back to another Short War video, and today we have very big news coming out of both the Middle East and also Ukraine. But first of all, we have a bombshell piece of news coming out of the Middle East because we just learned today that October the 25th, Israel actually struck Iran's top nuclear research facilities, which is responsible for developing all the nuclear material needed for Iran to complete their nuclear program. It was actually completely destroyed by the Israelis, and we just got word of that today on November the 15th, and that is a bombshell piece of news to say the least, because that was allegedly the red line for Iran, and we have yet to see a response. So we have all the details on that. And also another large piece of news coming out of Georgia in the breakaway region of Abkhazia. Apparently the civilians are rioting there as Russia is coming down to try to buy up all of their land in a new investment bill, and it looks like Abkhazia has absolutely delved into chaos as the parliament buildings are being stormed, and also the authorities are out there trying to get it under control to no avail. So that's also very big news as well. And also we are getting word that the Ukrainian attacks on Russian oil are apparently working, and also the sanctions are beginning to really take effect as well, because one by one we're getting reports that Russian oil facilities are shutting down due to financial difficulties, and it sounds like Russia is beginning to have the early stages of a total economic collapse, but of course only time will tell on that one. But we're jumping into our first news article of the day, which goes to next up. And this is by far our biggest news story of the day. We have confirmation that Israel has destroyed a top secret nuclear weapons research center in Iran, according to Axios, citing American and Israeli officials, and the target was the Talagan 2 military facility located within the Parchin military complex southeast of Tehran, and satellite images show the building completely destroyed. And it says here that the Israeli Defense Forces, also known as the IDF, struck the facility on October the 25th in response to Iran's attack on Israel on October the 1st, when Iranian forces launched over 200 rockets at Israeli cities. So to say this is a shocker is an understatement, because we were told that these facilities were not targeted in the last attack, and pretty much all the sources out there agreed on that these facilities were not targeted, and also the US said that they didn't hit them either. So apparently that was a complete lie, because we learned today from the American and Israeli officials that this facility was totally leveled to the ground and there's nothing left of it. And this was one of their biggest top secret nuclear weapons research centers inside of Iran. So we had heard that Netanyahu wanted to strike these facilities, and apparently we were told by American officials that they would not allow that to happen. But here we see right now the facility has been leveled in a major strike by the Israelis on October the 25th. So that is crazy to see. And moving on here to our next post, this one goes to Aleph, and this one just provides a little bit more detail about what this was and when this was actually active as a nuclear weapons facility. It says here once again, Israel destroyed that active nuclear weapons facility in Iran, according to that Axios report, and the facility at Parchin was used for nuclear research prior to 2003, but Israeli and US officials say that nuclear-related activity was conducted there this year. So apparently it became inactive for quite some time after 2003, and then it was reactivated maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, basically to start Iranian research once again into nuclear weapons. So it was indeed active when they struck it, and it sounds like a lot of material might have been lost at that facility, but we don't have any confirmation of what was lost or what exactly was there as they struck it. But nonetheless, that's a big loss, because that was one of their biggest research facilities by far. But with that, we're moving into our next article here, and this one goes to OSINT Defender. And remember, these attacks on the nuclear facilities happened on October the 25th, and we're now on November the 15th, so that was a few weeks back. But nonetheless, the Israelis are still going very, very hard on the proxy forces of Iran, and today we're hearing that the Israeli Air Force carried out strikes for the second day in a row against sites belonging to the PIJ in the Syrian capital of Damascus, with at least 20 PIJ and IRGC individuals being eliminated in yesterday's strikes. So Israel is certainly not relenting whatsoever on the Iranian proxy forces, but also another thing to note as well is we had heard that Iran was going to retaliate against Israel and strike them once again, but apparently they have backed off of those plans completely, at least according to public reporting, and they are actually going to take a back seat now and wait to see what happens with the upcoming developments with the U.S. foreign policy and things like that. So it looks like Iran may have calmed down at least for the short time being. But moving away here from our Israeli and also Iranian news, we are moving on to that news coming out of Abkhazia in the Russian breakaway region of Georgia. In this article from Knoll Reports, we can see that anti-Russian protests are erupting as thousands have stormed the local parliament building in Abkhazia, opposing an investment deal with Moscow, and the agreement would allow Russian oligarchs to buy land and develop real estate in Abkhazia, something that locals fiercely reject, fearing the loss of their land and identity, similar to what's actually happening in occupied Mariupol. So right now, things are popping off quite a bit in Abkhazia, which is of course a Russian-occupied region, which is a breakaway region of Georgia. This is of course an area which Russia does recognize as an independent state, and right now we're seeing that apparently the civilians there are getting very unhappy with this new investment deal. But let's take a look here and then we'll explain exactly what the deal is with this new bill. So as you can see right here, complete mayhem outside the parliament building here in Abkhazia, and this is quite a lot of people out here protesting this bill. So this situation is getting very out of hand for the Russian forces, which are currently occupying the territory of Abkhazia, which is the breakaway region of Georgia, and things are getting very, very heated out here as the riots actually grow hour by hour. So a very tense situation going down there in Abkhazia, and one to watch certainly. But real quick, we actually saw them actually break the doors to the parliament building and get inside. So let's take a look at that one too. And right here you can see it, there they are actually flooding inside of the parliament building as they broke, it looks like what is a back door to the building, and also they're breaking windows as well and climbing right inside. So they are not putting up with this Russian occupation much longer, and they're realizing that when the Russians take something over, they tend to loot the place and then leave it high and dry for the civilians, and that's what happened inside of Mariupol, and that appears to be what's happening inside of Abkhazia as well. So Putin is once again on a looting spree because his country is having a severe financial difficulty that he really can't get under control. So that's what we're seeing right here. But with that, we're actually moving on to our next post, and this one is going to go to Status 6 military and conflict news. And kind of like we just saw in that last clip right there, we actually have more footage of them actually walking around inside the parliament building. These are the rioters that actually got into the building, so the Russians didn't do a very good job of protecting it. So let's take a look at them actually roaming around the halls of the parliament. And right here you can see there are the rioters going up and down the halls where the Russian officials actually were inside of this building, and they're walking around. It looks like they're taking some videos, and I can't tell, that might be a Russian official or a military official right there in the middle of the crowd if I'm not mistaken. He had on some camo there, and it looks like he wasn't doing very much to stop it if that is indeed a guy who's in charge of security at this building. So very much out of control right here, and once again it is devolving hour by hour. And to show you exactly how much it is devolving, moving on here to our next post from War Translated, we can see that the occupying forces, meaning the Russians, are now using gas against the protesters as they are breaking through the fence. So let's take a quick look at this one as well. So you see there appeared to be a truck ramming through the gate of this building right here as the Russians are throwing out the tear gas, and they're basically tear gassing everybody, including the Russian officials, because the gas is going literally everywhere. And you see that there's some guy shouting at one of the Russians out here, and the Russians standing right in the middle of the tear gas as well. So nobody's wearing gas masks, so it's chaotic out here, like to say the least. The Russians don't have this under control, and it is indeed getting pretty bad. But with that, we are now moving away from our news from Abkhazia with that situation going down, and we're moving into our next piece of news here, which goes to the Ukrainian review. And we are getting some very big news about the Russian economy. Not only is the bond market collapsing, also several major property developers inside of Russia are absolutely filing for bankruptcy and collapsing as well. We are hearing that the Russian oil industry is finally getting hit really, really hard because of sanctions and also the Ukrainian attacks. We were told here by the Ukrainian review that at least 3 Russian refineries had to halt processing or cut runs due to heavy losses amid export curbs, rising crude prices, and also high borrowing costs, according to Reuters. And the 3 plants, the Tuops, the Ilsky, and also this third plant here, which I really cannot pronounce very well, it's a very tricky name, they've suspended or cut runs in the recent months. And man, this has been a long time coming because the Ukrainians have had the desire to knock out the Russian oil industry, because if they can do that, that will have a ripple effect throughout the Russian economy by ultimately causing a collapse. And it sounds like these 3 major plants right here, which have been the targets of Ukrainian attacks in the past, are now having to cut runs and also taking heavy financial losses as a result of the export curbs as well as the attacks themselves, and also rising crude prices. So right now the Russian economy is looking very, very bad, and we could be seeing perhaps a major Russian crisis here coming up in the next couple of days or even weeks with these things happening all at once. So a very big thing to watch, and we will be watching very closely. And with that, we're moving on to our next article here, and this one's going to go to Null Reports because we just got video today that apparently apparently snow has reached Kyiv, and this is a double-edged sword because we're about to show the video here in just a moment. Of course, it's very beautiful to see the snow in Kyiv, and the civilians do love it, but one thing this does indicate is the very difficult period of fighting has just reached Ukraine and also the Russians as well. This is the winter time, which gets very, very brutal to fight in for both sides, so things might start slowing down here on the front, which is good for Kyiv, I guess you could say, and also good for, I think, the Russians as well, because with this happening, the fighting won't be able to progress as fast as it was going, and this might actually end up slowing up the Kursk offensive for the Russians as well. So let's take a look at the video and see the snow falling down. And right here you can see it. There is the snow flurries falling right down here on the capital city Kyiv inside of Ukraine. But with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which also goes to the Ukrainian Review once again. And nonetheless, with all these challenges that Ukraine is indeed facing right now, the defense minister Umarov inside of Ukraine has said that Ukraine has not changed its goals to liberate all of its territories, and this is how he also commented on the information that Kyiv is ready to postpone the issue of territories in negotiations, freeze the front line, and also focus on security guarantees. And Umarov is basically making it clear right here that Ukraine is not going to give up their land in exchange for a quick peace deal, because that's not real peace, as Zelenskyy likes to call it. That is simply placating the Russians to let them regroup and once again re-invade Ukraine later when it becomes convenient. So it looks like the defense minister is making it super clear that Ukraine is not falling for that trick, and they will fight to the death to liberate all their territories, which is very noble indeed, and I think that Ukraine will be successful in the end. It's going to be probably a pretty tough fight in between now and then, but they will ultimately be victorious in the end. But with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which goes to Nexta as well. And we have some big happenings coming out of Germany, because today, for the first time in 2 years, apparently Scholz has asked Putin to withdraw troops, and the German chancellor, during a conversation with Putin, called on Russia to negotiate with Ukraine to establish a just and long-term peace. And quote-unquote, this is what the German chancellor said, this is Scholz. He said, "I spoke to President Putin on the phone and called him to end the war of aggression by Russia against Ukraine and to withdraw its troops." He also said that Russia must show a willingness to negotiate with Ukraine and with the aim of achieving a just and lasting peace, said the German chancellor. And on this one, I really want to ask the audience, because I have mixed feelings about this, to be perfectly honest, because this is the first time in 2 years that Scholz has spoken to Putin, and nothing has really changed on the Russian side. So all of a sudden, Scholz talking to Putin, I'm really not sure if that was justified or not, but let me know down in the comments below. Do you agree with Scholz? Should he have spoke with Putin, or should he have actually not done this phone call whatsoever? So we do have a statement from Zelenskyy coming up in our next article here, which apparently is not a very good commendation of this call right here by Zelenskyy himself. And moving into that one, this is an article from Null Reports. And this is actually an excerpt from Zelenskyy's evening speech, where he directly commented on the Scholz-Putin phone call, and this is quite a scathing remark from Zelenskyy. Zelenskyy said, quote-unquote, he said, "About one of today's news stories, Chancellor Scholz told me that he is going to call Putin, and Olaf's call, in my opinion," meaning Zelenskyy's opinion, "is a Pandora's box, and now there may be other conversations and other calls and just a lot of words." And Zelenskyy said, "This is exactly what Putin has been wanting for a long time, and it's extremely important for him to weaken his isolation, Russia's isolation that is, and to conduct ordinary negotiations that will not end in anything, and the way he has been doing for decades. And this allowed Russia to change nothing in its policy, to do nothing in essence, and this is exactly what led to the war. And we understand all these challenges now, and we know how to act, and we want to warn you, there will be no Minsk 3. We need real peace." And he also said, "Slava Ukraine," and Hiram Slava. So clearly, Zelenskyy was not happy about the Scholz-Putin phone call. I would honestly tend to lean towards Zelenskyy's position here. I think the phone call really was not that productive, and it does sort of weaken the isolation that Putin has been put under with the chancellor now calling up Putin. It seems like maybe that might give Putin some legitimization, or at least some credence to his position that he's currently fighting for inside of Ukraine. So me personally, I would not have made the phone call, but Scholz is of course free to do what he wants, and the people of Germany will have to decide whether or not they like that or not. But Zelenskyy clearly did not like it. But nonetheless, we are moving on to our last article of the day, and this one goes to the Kyiv Post. And this is a pretty straightforward statement here from the Kyiv Post. It says, "The U.S. intends to transfer all the promised weapons to Ukraine before the current president leaves office, according to the Pentagon sources." And of course, we have been hearing this rumbling in the background for quite some time, and it sounds like it is indeed confirmed. The U.S. is basically undergoing a emergency operation to transfer the remaining weapons to Ukraine while there are a couple of months left in the current administration. So however you feel about this is of course a good thing that all of a sudden the aid is being sent rapidly to Ukraine. It should have been sent that way before. I'm not sure why they're suddenly doing that now, because they could have done that in the past. But nonetheless, I'm glad it is happening, and they are sending the weapons which Ukraine desperately needs right now, because they are fighting very heavily in Kursk, and they do need those weapons to reassure their soldiers. So very good to hear. And with that is actually our last news article of the day. So I want to go ahead and thank you all for watching, and also if you did like this video, press the like button on it as well, and also subscribe to the channel for more daily war updates just like this one. We really do appreciate it when y'all do that, because it tells us that y'all really enjoy the content, and we love to see it. And of course, be sure to join us at 10 p.m. Eastern tonight for the next night of War News streaming, where we'll cover all the news that happens after the video comes out, basically tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern. So be sure to tune in then. And also, if you want to support our channel financially, you can do so on our Patreon page, and the link is in the description below for Patreon, where you can go over there, sign up for a monthly membership, and support the channel that way, which is a very big help. And also, huge shout out to our Patreon supporters, by the way, because y'all do make this possible as well, and we appreciate every single one of you that are subscribed to Patreon. So with that, folks, thank you all for watching. We'll see you tonight, and bye-bye for now.